I'm Charlie Bright of Gold Derby, and today I'm speaking with Mark Mothersbaugh, the composer of the score for the Netflix animated film The Mitchells versus the Machines. The first question I wanted to ask is when it comes to the different characters in the movie, did you zero in on specific sounds or instruments for the different characters in the film?
Yeah, and tried a bunch of different things. We wanted to make Dad more old school, rustic, loves being out in the country woods, so I tried different things with guitars and even banjos and harmonicas, and you hear some of that stuff in there. Uh, and then the kids got, more modern instrumentation. They were pretty much electronic, a little bit of fuzz guitar on Sister, and Mom was more, I think. What do you remember? I think it was woodwinds, right, that we ended up landing on.
I
When
believe
I
so,
say
yeah.
stuff, it's like I'm a little unsure. It's because when I work with Lord and Miller, uh, they they're interesting because even though we're in animation, which you do so, you have an idea to shoot something new, and it takes a while to for it to go back to the animation house, get created, and then come back. So it's like it's kind of, they're atypical in the fact that they're making changes like to dialogue, to sound effects, to music, to cutting. They'll cut scenes at like 5 minutes till midnight on these things. It's kind of interesting. It's like you know they get more inspired as the project moves along. So for all the characters that have special sounds for them, uh, oftentimes I give those guys a second or a third choice also to so that when they're on their final mix stage, they have a wide range of tools to choose from. So I think she was woodwinds anyhow, Mom, and the robots, both both the bad robots and the dysfunctional good guys, they each had their own things. I have an experimenter with a friend of mine who was in a band. I think he's in the band Mutants now, but I knew him when he was in Negative Land, and he was just visiting me one day, and he had some like uh, homemade musical instrument, electronic instrument that was kind of uncontrollable, and he called it Booper or something like that. He had an affectionate name for it, but we played some of that on there, and I don't think I heard any of that in the final mix of the movie. It could have been in there somewhere, but we try a lot of different things for characters, sounds.
So, as you alluded to earlier, this film, Mitchells versus the Machines, is another one that is affiliated with uh, Lord and Miller. You've scored a number of their projects, including ones they've directed, like the Jump Street movies and the Lego movies. And you also worked on stuff that they've produced, like this. What do you enjoy most about working on their projects?
Well, they say we met the week before they got fired from Rugrats, a really long time ago. They were like, I think they were interns or something, and they were doing sketches. That's what they tell me. They say we met over at Klasky Chupo uh, back in those days. But the first thing I did with them was Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, which we did a couple of, and it was just a skinny little kids book, and it wasn't around when I was a kid, so I'd never seen it before, and I got it, and the imagery wasn't impressive at all. The imagery in the book, and the story was very lightweight, but it was this interesting thought of food falling out of the sky, and I was kind of like, well, what are they going to do with that? And when they gave me the script, I was like, oh, that's what they're going to do with it. And then when I saw the film of it, it was amazing. And even more to the point was 21 Jump Street. I never watched 21 Jump Street when it was a TV show, but I went back and listened to it when they said, "Hey, our next project's 21 Jump Street." So I went, online and started looking for it, and I was like, "This is a really lame show. How come? How do you make a movie out of this?" And the theme song I thought was awful. I thought that's one of the worst theme songs ever. And I was like, I got to see what they want to do. And they ended up making these two really great films. The films were both really funny. I was kind of sad that they never made a third one for both of those franchises, both Cloudy and 21, because they 22 Jump Street was as funny as 21, and they just they kind of have a fresh outlook at their humor, and they kind of update our times in a way that I hadn't seen before them, and I liked it that they could take kind of. So that's why when I got asked to work on Lego, I said I want you to meet some people, some friends of mine that I've just been doing some things with, and I introduced the Lego franchise people to them, and it became love at first sight. They did quite a few Lego films, so far, and I don't know. They're just enjoyable. They're always fresh and interesting, and it's sometimes sometimes you get to work with artists, and they fall into that category. I think they definitely are artisans more than artisans. They're artists.
So was there a part of the score that was for Mitchell's versus the Machines that was particularly challenging to get the right to get it to the way that you wanted it? Was there part of that?
There were different things throughout the movie that were trickier, and it was mostly all the relationships between the family members and getting that so that. And also it was partly, and I think partly is because I was going through that exact same experience where my daughter was about to go to, except the pandemic happened and it set it back a year, but she was scheduled to go to the East Coast to an art school. And I'm like, oh no, is this my story? Except I hope I don't have to deal with robots. But it was like there was some of that, and but it was like the family members all had very complicated relationships with each other, and so you had to be careful of that when you were choosing instruments and choosing tone for things. And part of it was the pandemic, but part of it was just they had this opportunity to like to say, hey, will you try something else also? And and some of the cues, there were like 28 revisions of them. So I have to say that there was a lot of work that went into this movie for sure, and I think that was the toughest stuff. The robots were the most fun for me, both the good and the evil robots. I loved working with both of them.
So looking over at your filmography and all the composing that you've done, there's definitely a wonderful affinity you have for scoring animated projects. And I was curious whether is there an aspect of scoring for animation that you enjoy more than scoring a live action piece?
You know what? I animation is probably the most complex of all the scoring to do. It's the most work intensive, really, just as because what you're called upon is for things that in live action they don't need you for, and that's like no matter how beautiful or how perfect the animation is, the most up-to-date animation today, if you look out your window and you're looking at your lawn, you're going to see a million blades of grass that are all growing and they're moving and there's insects on them and the wind is affecting them, and you have to take broad strokes in animation or else you would it would take you all day to get, I mean, all year to get one frame done, one second's worth of picture done. And so, they make a lot of concessions in animation, and it's up to music to help out on a lot of that. And it also gave me a chance to work with orchestras, which big orchestras. You have the biggest orchestras when you're working in animation, oftentimes because there's like 100 people, like for this one, where were we? Were we at Abbey Road, or I, I, I think that's where we recorded, but because I've done so many films with them, I've recorded a lot of them there. And but it's like you have 100 people sitting in a room, and they're waiting for the countdown, to start playing. And it's imperceptible. It's very minor, but you hear there's people breathing and their hearts are beating and blood's pumping through them, and that's part of the music. And I love synths. I synthesizers were the way electronic music was my entryway into music in my life, really. Uh, and but working with players, and there's like maybe 32 violinists, and they all start playing at the same time, and it's all slightly different. It's never the exact same twice. Like when you use library samples, orchestras, even the best library samples, if they're recorded at Air in London, or if they're recorded in Vienna or Berlin or Sony here in the U.S., or no matter where you recorded these orchestras, even people don't know it, but there's things that there's people hear it. They hear that every time the violins hit a B flat, it's played exactly the same, and it sounds exactly the same. Where if it's a live recording and that B flat gets played 20 times in a piece of music, you're hearing them all slightly start at different times in different parts of a bowing, or they're breathing differently, and all of that makes the music brings more life. It makes it more realistic. It makes the animation, it breathes life into trees with leaves just going like this a little bit. So animation is my chance to get to work with big orchestras, and that's kind of why I do it. I love that.
So, for our viewers who may not realize it, I mean, you've been making music for a long time, even outside of film and television. Of course, you were part of the band Devo as well. And I was curious as to, we see a lot of people who come from more like band backgrounds coming into film music. Now we see people like Johnny Greenwood from Radiohead making his way in there. Oh, the Radiohead's one of my favorite bands, so it's like absolutely. But I'm curious as to, how did you start writing music for film and television?
Well, even in Devo, we paid attention to, although we knew that what we were doing, we were writing, 2 to 4 minute long songs, for that was like what Devo was kind of doing as our public. We paid attention to everything. We listened to elevator music, film music. I recorded before I didn't have a VHS. I couldn't afford a VHS machine, so I used to record movies off of my television set with a little handheld mono mic into my answering machine, and I'd flip the 90-minute tape over when it got to 45 minutes, and so I'd play back my favorite movies, but I only had the soundtrack, so I was listening to, the sound of like drums in the background, and then you hear some voices go, go get Lota, man come from ocean, man come from water, and you're hearing that, and then you get music that comes in under it. So I was always fascinated with scores, and I used to take tape recordings that I made of scores on tour, and I had a ghetto blaster that I took on planes. And I remember there's a movie called War of the Gargantuans, and it's like one It's a brown Godzilla and a green Godzilla, but it's like everybody in the audience knows it, but the people on screen aren't noticing that Godzilla changes colors, so that when he's a good Godzilla and he's protecting people, he's green, and then when he's a bad Godzilla and he's smashing buildings, he's brown. And they only figure it out right about at the end of the film, right before green and brown get in a big fight, and the green Godzilla takes the brown Godzilla and throws him way out into the Pacific Ocean somewhere where he obviously wasn't going to do any harm. But there was a part in that movie where there's a woman in a skyscraper, and she's in a on a she's in a nightclub, and she's singing a song called "The Words Get Stuck in My Throat." I said the word. It was kind of this goofball song, and but the bad Godzilla walks by, and just as she finishes the song, he sees her and he goes. He sticks his hand through the big glass window, and everybody in this nightclub, it's pandemonium. You just hear screaming and tables overturning and total chaos for about 30 seconds before you hear. And if you know Japanese soundtracks, you know, like what I'm talking about, there's like a bunch of trumpets going, but for that 30 seconds. Okay, so this was like me when I was kind of a little bit of a, I guess you'd say an a-hole, because I got really bored. We'd be on tour, and I'd set the ghetto blaster next to me, and I'd just wait till just as the wheels went, beep, that first little chirp of the wheels touching the ground, and I'd hit the button, and you'd hear crashing and screaming, and there'd be stewardesses freaking out, and they'd be like trying to figure out where it was, and then they'd come over and I go, I'm sorry, when we hit the bump, it set off the, so I was waiting for my chance. And we did, our first film we ever made was called The Truth About De-Evolution, and it had two songs, Jocko Homo and Secret Agent Man, but I wrote interstitial music for it and music behind the credits, and that was probably my first thing. I was 1976, but I didn't go to school for music. I went to school to be a visual artist, and that's where I met Jerry. We were both visual artists. We were at Kent State, and I was kind of a graffiti artist in those days. I pasted pictures of that I did artwork of like astronauts like holding potatoes standing on the moon back in those days all over campus. So when the shootings happened at Kent State, that stuff was up on stop signs and fire hydrants. It unfortunately didn't stop people from shooting other people, but they were there to witness that. Then I did something in 1979 when we came out to California. I kind of was friends with these guys that had been child actors, and then they fell out of acting and kind of were just kind of these guys that were around town, like Dean Stockwell, Russ Tamblyn, Dennis Hopper, and they weren't working in those days, but they liked Devo for some reason. So, and they'd try to get me to drink. I didn't drink or do drugs, so they'd try to get me to drink or do drugs with them, and I never did. But they asked me to. Dean directed a one-man off-Broadway play that Russ Tamblyn starred in, and it was written by Ian Esco, the writer, and it was called Man with Bags, and it was a very absurdist, kind of Dadaistic play. And so I wrote a bunch of music for that, and really enjoyed that, writing music, for him to do his dialogue over. And it ended up being music that got used in, because Dean worked on Human Highway with Neil Young, which Devo was in. We were in that film, but they used my score that I'd written for this off-Broadway thing in Human Highway, and so that was probably the first thing. And then Peewees Playhouse was after that, and then I just did a bunch of stuff, and it just kept coming, and it was so much fun. It was kind of like, when you write an album, you spend a couple months writing 15 songs, 2 or 3 months writing 15 songs. then you rehearse them, and then you go and you record them for a week or two. And then you start putting together a live show, and you make a video for one of the songs or a film for it. And you think of costumes, and you come up with merchandising. We did our own posters and everything for all our projects. And we designed our outfits for on stage and stuff. And we're doing all that. And then you go out on tour for like 6 months, and you go around the world, and you come back and you get to write 12 more songs for the next record. And when I started doing Peewees Playhouse, it's like they gave me a tape on Monday. On Tuesday, I wrote 12 songs worth of music. On Wednesday, I recorded it. On Thursday, I put a reel-to-reel tape in the mail and sent it to New York, where they were mixing the show. Friday, they would mix the show down. Saturday, we'd watch it on TV. And then Monday, I got a new tape. And I was kind of like, sign me up for this. I get to spend more time being creative and writing music. So that's what lured me into the world of soundtracks and scores.
Well, Mark, thank you so much for joining us. We wish you all the best over this upcoming award season. And to all of our viewers, please like this video, smash that subscribe button, and don't forget to go to goldderby.com and use the Gold Derby app to make your predictions and see if you can outsmart top prognosticators in Hollywood. Thanks again, Mark.
Thanks.